But you were not one of the ones that ended up being hospitalized for it.
No, she got hospitalized. I miss you, Karen. I love you.
You see, just give me enough time and the X-ratedness just rubs off on everyone. Okay. This orange-colored cell is showing you the soma, or cell body, of a neuron, and then the little spiny things that are extending out are the dendrites. And there's more to that anatomy. You might have heard of dendritic spines, and we're not doing a neurobiology class proper, so we're just going to say dendrites. And all those green things that you are seeing attached to that orange cell membrane, those are not green sperm. They are actually representing upstream axons and terminal boutons from upstream neurons. So what does that look like? Remember yesterday I said, this is my picture of a neuron. It's not a dead stick figure. Do you remember that? Okay, well, we can have chains of these. This neuron that is upstream is called the presynaptic because the synapse is a functional contact between two neurons. So this is before the synapse, presynaptic cell, and this one is called postsynaptic. All these green squiggly lines with the terminal boutons, those are showing you this part of the presynaptic cell. Then this part of our picture, showing you the soma, is the postsynaptic cell. And here's the axon, and the picture does not show you the terminal bouton of that neuron. It doesn't look like it's a very long lecture. It's very misleading. It is a long lecture because it's very dense. So we're going to start with the dendrites. They are the receiving end. And the dendrites have a specific kind of gated channel. They have a ligand gated channel, which means in order for that ligand gated channel to open, you need the key. The name of the key for this unit is not a hormone. Remember, hormones are chemical signals that bind to receptors. They are ligands. The name of our key, our ligand in this unit, is called a neurotransmitter. And it's the upstream neuron that releases the neurotransmitter onto the downstream neuron. And on the soma and dendrites, we have those ligand-gated channels. Now, when you learn about ligand-gated channels and neurotransmitters, one of the terms you're going to come across is something called an excitatory post-synaptic potential. Do you remember what potential means? Separation of charge. Remember yesterday it was one of our scary terms, membrane potential, voltage difference, just means separation of charge. Excitatory postsynaptic potential, or EPSP, is a fancy way of saying the downstream neuron will depolarize. So do you remember our number line? Where is membrane potential, resting membrane potential? I'm over here. Move me if the downstream neuron that I am targeting has an EPSP. Which way should I move? I move this way, correct? I depolarize. Am I getting closer or further away from threshold trigger point? Getting closer. So EPSPs mean we're getting closer to that threshold value. We're getting closer to that all or none event. Someone's pulling the trigger, and we're almost to that trigger point. Okay, I gave you four electrolytes. Just stretching. Okay. I gave you 4 electrolytes yesterday. Tell me which of the 4 can give us an EPSP. Sodium. Why can sodium give us an EPSP? You're not filling in all of this conversation. If sodium has more permeability, which way would it move? Into the cell. What charge does it bring with it?
Move me!
Are we getting closer?
Yes.
Good. So that's an EPSP. What other choices do we have? Calcium. Good. Where is calcium most abundantly found? Outside the cell. What charge does it have with it? +2. So if it comes into the cell,
Move me!
am I getting closer to threshold?
Yes.
I am. So that's an EPSP as well. Can chloride? No. What do you think chloride would do if we allowed it into the cell? Hyperpolarize. Am I closer or further away?
Further away.
That's an IPSP, inhibitory postsynaptic potential. That's like someone putting on the gun safety. Less likely to reach threshold. Okay, what about potassium? If potassium has more permeability, that's true. It would hyperpolarize, and that would lead to an IPSP. However, potassium, you've heard me, it's my least favorite electrolyte. It is the hardest one to rein in. Do you remember potassium has a greater amount of potassium leak channels?
Yeah.
Well, some cells have the ability to plug those leak channels. And if potassium can't leak out, then that means you're trapping it in the cell. Are you following? Mm-hmm. Then that means you're trapping positive charges. And if you're trapping positive charges, move me.
Right.
So if I decrease potassium permeability, could I lead to an EPSP?
Yes.
Yes, I can. See that damn potassium. I love to hate it. It's my least favorite electrolyte. So do the same thing with IPSP, right? We kind of just already did this. How can we create an IPSP? Should we move sodium? Should we move calcium? Could we increase potassium permeability? You lose your positivity in life, you become more negative. Could I allow chloride into the cell? Those 2 options would lead to an IPSP. I am further away from threshold, less likely to fire an action potential. Now I gotta tell you that this downstream neuron, the postsynaptic cell in this picture, is being influenced by 3 upstream neurons. And we're told in the picture that neuron number 1 is excitatory, neuron number 2 is excitatory, and the red neuron number 1 is inhibitory. That means when they release their ligand, when they release their neurotransmitter, they are going to change permeability in the downstream cell. 2 of those neurons will lead to EPSPs, depolarize, closer to threshold. 1 of those will lead to an IPSP, further away. Now this poor downstream neuron is being bombarded by the neurotransmitters from all 3 neurons. And it has to make a decision. Am I getting closer? Am I reaching threshold? Or am I getting further away? It has to tally. It has to summate. And there are two different ways for a downstream neuron to summate all of these incoming signals. There's spatial summation and temporal. Let's explore spatial summation first. Okay, I'm going to pick someone somewhat in the middle of the room. Dr. Shaw. She's working on her laptop. We are her upstream neurons. You all are going to communicate to her. You're going to say a word, and here is the choice. You can say close, open. In your mind, pick which word you want to say to Dr. Shaw. And the idea is, will she close her laptop or keep it open? Okay? So we're trying to give her a command. She's the downstream cell. Where are all of those green sperm that I showed you in the first picture? Okay, when I say on the count of 3, you're going to yell your word. Ready? You're going to say you're going to say one of two, correct? Open or closed. 1, 2, 3. Closed. Took her a while, right? She hesitated. She was trying to process the volume of closed versus volume of open. And you all kind of shouted with the same intensity in your voices. Let's do it again. Will you please open? You all are shouting at her at the same time, but from different spaces, different places. She might have made her decision because maybe those of you who were closer to her, she heard you better. The volume meant something to her. She was thinking about that. So let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. Oh! Notice the difference. Someone learned the game. I'm going to try and be louder so she'll hear me. Okay. So spatial summation means many upstream neurons fire at the same time, and they fire once. The downstream neuron has to process all of this incoming information that's bombarding it at once, just like we demonstrated. That's spatial summation. Now be careful, be careful. I said many of you are shouting at the same time from different locations. Are you hearing that? Because when I say at the same time, you all think, oh, time is part of this. And that's easy now to confuse spatial summation with temporal summation. So let me show you the difference of that. We're going to do it again. On the count of 3, one word choice. You're shouting that to Dr. Shaw. 1, 2, 3. Oh, close. I won. You all shouted at the same time, together, one time. I kept shouting. One neuron firing over and over and over again, repeatedly, is temporal, meaning firing many times in a unit of time. 1,000 times per second. I kept shouting. In reality, these two mechanisms happen together. Just like we demonstrated with that last example. You all obeyed spatial summation, and I was a game changer showing you temporal. Now you can appreciate why spatial summation, many upstream neurons firing at the same time from different locations. The word time makes you think temporal. It is not. So maybe you should change that word. Many upstream neurons firing at the same moment to a single downstream neuron from different locations. Spatial. Temporal. Upstream neuron firing repeatedly to a downstream neuron. And if you look at your homework packet number 2, there is actually a sample homework question that helps you with distinguishing the two. And I'm very particular with my word choice towards that one. Entertain that homework packet after tomorrow. Right now you should be focusing on homework packet 1 tonight. Okay, so if we now go to the picture that I have on here, here is excitatory neuron number 1 firing one time, depolarizing the downstream neuron, but not enough to get it to threshold. Then it fires again depolarizing, but not enough to get to threshold. If it fires in quick succession, the two signals add to each other. That is temporal summation. Fire quickly. Close, 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 close. Then over here we have spatial. Excitatory neuron fires by itself. Excitatory neuron number 2 fires by itself. With their powers combined, firing at the same moment, but from different locations, they are able to get the downstream neuron to threshold. Can we have antagonistic summation? Can we have excitatory neuron 1 fire, causing depolarization? Inhibitory neuron firing, causing hyperpolarization. And if they have spatial summation, if they fire at the same moment, they negate each other. Then that means the downstream neuron stays at resting membrane potential. Are you getting that? Is that okay? Do you have questions? Amber is making... That was just on the news, by the way. That puppies, dogs, not wolves, have developed their muscles around their eyebrows so that they have the puppy face, the puppy eyes, and they change the diameter of their eye openings so they look more like a baby. And that's why you're like, oh. Yes, Kira.
So we can still have that antagonistic summation. It's not the ESP cancellation.
It is.
It can be called either one.
It is. They're negating each other.
Okay.
That's what negate means. You're canceling each other out. Anybody else? Okay. So what now? We're out of the dendrites. The soma also has this type of summation. The dendrites and soma have ligand-gated channels where this kind of summation occurs. This is also where graded potentials happen, the kind that dissipate with time and distance. But if depolarization occurs enough and it reaches the axon hillock, and that's the part of the axon closest to the soma, that is the first place where you have voltage-gated channels. Voltage-gated channels have thresholds. Remember, they are the gun. They are an all or none event. You either open or you don't. So at the axon hillock is where this all or none event is determined. Do we reach threshold? And by the way, from yesterday, which voltage gated channel has a lower set threshold? Sodium. That's the reason why most textbooks tell you threshold is minus 55. Yes, that's the threshold to start an action potential, but do all voltage-gated channels have their own unique threshold? Yes, they do. Just like my analogy, all guns have their own unique trigger point. If you don't like the gun violence analogy, the clutch in the stick shift car, remember from yesterday. And we have our dance of our gates. Remember me running yesterday? Open sodium first. Why?
Has the most permeability.
Okay, so let me help you because you're Wednesday. We want the most electrical current. All of you appreciate your mechanical devices, but in order for them to work, they need electrical events, remember? So electrical events precede mechanical. Which ion has the greatest potential to generate the most electrical current out of the two that I gave you examples of yesterday?
Sodium.
Open sodium first, I run hard that way, and then can I get current by opening a different channel next?
Yes.
Potassium, this way. If I open potassium first, I don't have that much more to go, and I hit Nernst potential. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Nernst equilibrium. No net gain or loss of current across the cell membrane at that point for potassium. So that's what I mean by the dance of the gates. Open sodium first, then get another bang for your buck by opening potassium second. Okay. Do I go with the X-rated analogy first, or do I do it Sister Mary Cara first? I'll go Sister Mary Cara first. And then I'll go X-rated, and then you'll appreciate Murnall's comment. Okay. And I will also give you a public safety announcement, so nobody goes to the hospital, which has happened. Voltage-gated channels have gating properties. And you might think, oh, yeah, gates. Gates are either open or closed. Two gating properties, open or closed. And that's a great way to start. That's a good way of thinking of it. But there's another layer of complexity. So I want you to think of us trying to go through an intersection. Okay, remember that? You want to conduct yourself through the intersection. Are you being met with resistance? When you drive off campus, do we have street lights on campus? Like traffic lights, I should say. No, but what do we have that impedes your conductance? Stop signs. And what are you supposed to do when you approach a stop sign? Stop. You are met with resistance. Think of that as closed. Then once you deem it safe, what can you do? Conduct yourself through the intersection. That's open. Most voltage-gated channels have two gated properties. Open, also known as activated, or closed, but could be opened, called deactivated. Two gating properties. However, sodium voltage-gated channels have three gating properties. They are like a traffic light. Red light, yellow light, green light. If the light turns green, that's open. You can conduct yourself through the intersection. That channel is activated for you. If the light is red, it means that intersection is closed for you. It's deactivated. Red lights can turn what? No. Thank you for that. Red lights can turn green. Good! So you have been out on the streets. Good. Red light means deactivated. Could open. Could turn green. Green lights turn yellow. Okay, there we go. Now, when you see a yellow light, what does that mean? No! It does not mean speed up. No, it doesn't mean that either. When was the last time you took a driver's test? It means you should, if safe, you should slow down and prepare to stop. That's what you're supposed to do. Not Dukes of Hazzard through that intersection. No. I have not been in a car accident. I'm a careful driver. And my dad, when he was alive, whenever I would say, I've never been in a car accident. And he goes, true, but you've caused 50,000. So what everyone's doing behind you. So sodium voltage gated channels are like the traffic lights. They have 3 gating properties, and their proper terms are not green light, yellow light, red light. That's not what we call them. We say green light is activated. You can go, you can conduct. Yellow light means you should not go through the intersection. It is beginning to close to you. That's called inactivation. Red light, that's deactivation. Green lights turn yellow, yellow lights turn and red lights turn green. Good. Now the reason why sodium voltage channels have these 3 gating properties is because, do you remember in my PowerPoints, I said, feel free to ooh and ah as you saw the little solutes moving through my cell membrane. Do you remember that? I made you do that for a reason, because it makes a memory. You remember the little thumb for the blue protein that moved? It acted as the gate. Remember that? And when the gate opened, you saw the solutes move, and you went, ooh, ah. Okay? So, if my body represents the integral protein, and my arms now represent the thumb, sodium voltage gated channels have 2 thumbs, 2 gates. There's a gate that faces the extracellular fluid and a gate that faces the intracellular fluid. If either gate is plugging the channel, can the solute move? No. Cannot. If both are not plugging the channel, can the solute move? Yes. Okay, good. So, turns out, at resting membrane potential, this is what the gates look like. Do you see this? Describe it. One open, one closed. Can the solute move? No. Good. This is red light. This is red light. Red lights can turn green. Yes? The proper term for this? Deactivated. Deactivated can turn to activated. Good. So if we reach threshold, what is happening in the cell? It's depolarizing, isn't it? That means positive charges are coming in the cell. And these that my arms are representing, remember that's part of the protein. They are made of amino acids. And amino acids and proteins, they can change shape. I showed you this when I told you about membrane transport. I said proteins can change conformation and kind of flip. You remember that? They can change shape. So these are not called thumbs in real biological terms. They are called ball and chains. Because when scientists studied them, it was a long chain of amino acids off the main protein. And at the end, the amino acids balled up. It looked like a ball and chain. That's what they called them. So at deactivation, this is what it looks like. Is there movement? No. As the inside of the cell becomes more and more positive, positive charges physically bind to the ball and chain. And it makes it change conformation. It moves it. And it moves, exposing the lumen. Activated. Can this solute move? And what are we talking about? Sodium. We're talking about sodium. And it's going to come into the cell. More and more sodium coming in the cell. More and more positive charges. And guess what? The inside of the cell is becoming less negative, very positive. And those positive charges are also starting to stick on the other ball and chain. And it too is moving. But this way. It's like the cell's own molecular timer. Green lights do not stay green indefinitely, do they? And going home late at night, you're approaching a light in the distance and it's green and you're like, oh, it's going to change before I get there. And you try all sorts of nonsense trying to keep that green light green. You're flashing your lights. It's on a timer. So as the positive charges are coming in during the action potential, this other internal gate is also changing conformation. Yellow light. Is there conductance? Is there movement of the solute? No. Can yellow lights go green?
Yeah.
No. That would be chaos in our society if that happened. Can yellow go to red and quickly go back to green? Has that happened? Yeah, you're like, wow, that was a fast light. It's a smart light. It knew no other track. You said those words. But if a yellow light went back to green, that would be very dangerous. Our society would not know how to function. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Name the movie. You all are too young. Ghostbusters. Bill Murray. The Marshmallow Man. Dogs and cats living mass hysteria. No? That's homework this weekend, okay? Yes. Okay. In order for yellow light, in order for our traffic light to reset, what must happen? Yellow lights turn what? Red. That means the inside of the cell has to become negative. We have to reset. Okay, so if it becomes negative, positive charges are coming off. And these things will conformation change yet again. Is there conductance? No. This is red light, also known as deactivation, correct? Can red lights turn green?
Yes.
Confirmation change. Activated, green light. Positive charges coming in. Internal gate moving. Inactivated. Okay? So you are going to say red light, green light, or yellow light based on my position. You ready? Ready?
Red light. Green light. Yellow light. Green light. Red light. Yellow.
Okay, are those proper terms?
No.
Okay, now we're going to say the proper terms. Activated, inactivated, deactivated. Okay, deactivated, red light, could turn green. Activated, green light, will turn
Yellow.
yellow light. Should we go through the intersection? No. And does our yellow light have to reset before we can get to green again?
Yes.
Good job. You ready?
Deactivated. Activated. Inactivated. Deactivated. Activated. Inactivated. Deactivated.
Good job. Okay, so I am going to give you a break today, but I'm going to send you off to your break with a very X-rated vision. You never talk like this to your class, do you? No, she's like Sister Mary Catherine Shaw. So, there's something called absolute refractory period and relative refractory period. Notice that this is a picture of an action potential. Absolute refractory period begins when the cell is at threshold. Let me act that out to you. I'm at rest. Depolarize me, please. Good. If I reach threshold, this begins the all or none. It also begins absolute refractory period. Sodium voltage gated channels open. They are activated. I swing hard this way, don't I? But then at the peak of the action potential, at any given moment, a cell's membrane potential is a reflection of the ion with the greatest permeability. So what happens over here? Those sodium voltage gated channels.
Inactivated.
Good. But what other channel has been opening right around here and is still opening more?
Potassium.
Good. And which way does potassium want to move? So when I start getting negative again, confirmation change.
Deactivated.
Yeah, so we go from threshold to threshold. And then the cell hyperpolarizes, which means as it hyperpolarizes, even more of those sodium voltage gated channels are for sure in the red light status and could open again. But if you want them to open again and the cell's hyperpolarized, what kind of stimulus are you going to need the second time around if it's hyperpolarized? Where on our number line is threshold for sodium voltage gated channels? The lowest set threshold. Minus 55. Where is resting membrane potential?
Minus 77.
How much of a difference is that? 15 millivolts. If the cell is hyperpolarized to minus 80, where's threshold? Minus 55 for sodium. How much of a difference is that now? So if we want the sodium voltage gated channels to go from deactivated to activated, we're going to require a greater stimulus that second time if it happens while the cell is hyperpolarized. Won't it? Enter the X-rated homework assignment. Are there examples in your everyday life of absolute versus relative refractory periods? In the strictest biological terms, to describe absolute refractory period for a sodium voltage-gated channel, which has these kinds of refractory periods, the proper words are, during absolute refractory period, no amount of stimulus, no matter how great, can keep those sodium voltage-gated channels activated. They can't. As the cell becomes more and more positive, what's happening to that internal gate? It's its own undoing, isn't it? It's a molecular timer. You cannot keep that from happening. It is absolute. We have to go from green to yellow back to red. It is absolute. And once we reset to red, could we open them again? Yes. If the cell happens to be hyperpolarized, might we need a greater stimulus? That's relative refractory period. They could open again, but if the cell is hyperpolarized, you might need a stronger stimulus the second time. Every